chapter of ISP, and I'm excited to have you here today to discuss tech transfer. Before we get started, I'm just going to go through a few housekeeping items. First off, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Massey Bioservices. And next, some information about how you can participate today. You'll have an opportunity to submit your questions by typing them in the Q&A section of Pigeonhole. A link to the Pigeonhole Q&A platform has been provided in your confirmation email, also listed in the chat box. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. You can also vote on those questions. They'll get moved up and down the screen, and we'll know what the most popular questions are based on your responses. We're here to collect those questions and address them today. It's much easier to get them through Pigeonhole than putting them into the chat feature. They'll definitely get responded to if you go through that way. Just a reminder to stay on mute, just to keep the time down and allow the program to move smoothly through. Last, we hope you continue the conversations on the chapter's social media platforms listed here. I'd like to introduce Charlie Mayer, and he's with CAI, is a global director of process and managing technology. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Charlie for this, which should be a really interesting subject on tech transfer.
Eric, how you doing? Thanks so much for the introduction, and thanks everybody for joining today. So Eric, if it's okay with you, what I think we're going to do is start off with a conversation just really briefly about what is tech transfer and some of the challenges. I'm sorry?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is going to be an exciting question, and something that we're all really looking forward to know more about is how to deal with tech transfer during the COVID age.
Okay. Well, let me. All right, how about that? Technology in many different ways. So hopefully you can see the screen and you can hear me.
We can.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so what I'm going to do, if we're okay with this, start off with just a brief overview of what tech transfer is. Then we'll take a look at some of the challenges of what make tech transfer challenging in any day. But then the next layer on top of that is how the COVID pandemic and the industry response to it has resulted in making tech transfer even more challenging and more urgent to get it right. And then we'll kind of get into this kind of the main meat of the conversation around focusing on what are those best practices around tech transfer so that in the age of COVID, we can achieve success. So sound good?
Sounds great. Excited to hear it.
Okay. So first of all, we'll just jump right in from ICH Q10, which is, of course, a guidance document. The key factor around tech transfer is transfer of product and process knowledge from the sending site to the receiving site in order to achieve product realization. So what's really interesting about tech transfer is, frankly, it's something that's prevalent throughout the product lifecycle, whether it's moving something from concept to development or into clinical scale onto commercial and then product discontinuance, or whether it goes into generic production. In any case, you're going to need to deal with tech transfer at each of those stages. So really, it's integral to product realization right here in ICH Q10. And some of the things that they really highlight in the guidance is manufacturing processes, control strategies, the process validation activities, and ongoing continual improvement. So those are just key pieces of tech transfer, just to give us some framework for what we're talking about. So let's talk about what is challenging about tech transfer. There are a lot of different things that are variables that impact the way that tech transfer, the demands of doing a tech transfer. So for instance, the life cycle phase, something that's a clinical stage or a developmental stage going to clinical or clinical to commercial and so forth, each have their own challenges, such as early stage products may not have good process definition at the early stage of their life. So it may be difficult to understand exactly how you're going to transfer that. So the knowledge is not really well formed. Other stages of life, the commercial stage may be better defined, but in some cases, the technology may be very old. So in case of tech transfer for very old, let's say products, a lot of the knowledge is tacit knowledge that's been learned over the time and may not actually be readily available to collect into a tech transfer sending site package. So that's one challenge. Another challenge is around the regulatory domain. If you're moving it within one regulatory domain, it's not as challenging as if you're going across regulatory domains, where you might actually have to take into consideration other things that maybe the European group has a little bit different from the FDA. And then the sending unit and the receiving unit, what site type are they? Are they both internals, like internal to your company? Or are you moving it from your company to an external, it's a CMO or a partner? Or if you're moving it from a partner back internal, let's say you did your development at a CDMO and you're going to move it in-house for your commercial scale manufacturing. And then finally, external to external. Let's say you have a network of CDMOs that or CMOs that are manufacturing your product, maybe in the United States, and you want to move to a new market, let's say Asia. And now you're going to move it from a CMO in the United States to a CMO in Asia. That is another kind of a wrinkle in the challenging or the variables that might have an impact on the complexity of that tech transfer. So the number of sites. So for instance, one-to-one is pretty much the most standard and straightforward. But in some cases, like for a rapid scale up on a vaccine, where you develop it in one place and you need to rapidly have it manufactured across different locations, whether it's being just in locations in the United States or locations around the world. That challenge, you have multiple tech transfers happening at one time for one product. And then similarly, if you have a product that may have had different steps of the manufacturing process at different locations, you're going to consolidate it in one location. We've had this challenge before, where you have to take the pieces and put the jigsaw puzzle together under one roof. That's another challenge. And then finally, another kind of area is the state of product and process knowledge. So is it in development? Is it out of date? Kind of mentioned that earlier. Is it in people's heads? Never really written down very well. Or maybe because it's in developmental, it's not yet specifically written down in your quality target product profile or other places like that the quality by design process would have you do. Changes are in process. So for instance, you're manufacturing in one place, you're planning to make a change in the process itself as you move it to another location. Changes in the equipment you're going to use. So maybe some antiquated equipment is going to be replaced with newer equipment in the new location. The material supply chain locally may have different specifications and suppliers that you need to requalify. The scale, you may be scaling it up or scaling it down. And then you have quick challenges around language and people. Obviously, it's a different team that's going to be manufacturing. So this is, Eric, if I just could say, these are the things that really make a tech transfer challenging, kind of no matter where you're doing it at any time. Make sense?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it absolutely does make sense. Are you seeing that it's different in this COVID age, where you may be making multiple tech transfers at the same time? You're trying to make the same drug at multiple sites to really rush it to market, or how does that come into your whole play here?
Exactly. So let me just kind of just make the point. There's no cookie cutter anytime, but here's the couple thoughts around what makes tech transfer a challenge during the age of COVID. So what's happened is, to respond to the public health crisis, there is a whole lot of activity in the industry right at this time, over the last 9 months, to do a lot of work right at once, all focused on the same kind of problem. So there's a large number of new products coming to market all at once. And so that basically puts a lot of strain on the system, supply chain, people, bandwidth of people who are making decisions, capital. There's many things that kind of challenge that. So when you bring all that together, everybody's trying to solve this really tough problem all at once with many different, unique, and novel ways. That puts a strain on pretty much every system that's out there. Compressed timelines. Of course, the public is looking to us to bring forward both vaccines and therapeutics that resolve this pandemic, and of course, novel technologies, mRNA, DNA vaccines, and other things like that that are completely different and may not have actually ever been approved before. Have some challenges around how you're going to actually there's no kind of let's say template that you can use to take an mRNA vaccine to the FDA. It's a lot of bespoke work you got to do. And then many startup companies launching their first product. So many folks have, great people come together, but even the most seasoned individuals, when forming a team for the first product, there's always, first time challenges there. Focus on repurposing existing facilities. This is something that's really different about COVID, is that a lot of times when you're bringing a new product to market, you design or find a facility that is, fit to purpose, very closely to what is needed to manufacture that product. It happens to be that in the crush of urgency to get products to market in our current situation, there, in many cases, not time to build anything new. So what's happening is that existing facilities are being repurposed to make the products that are necessary to address the pandemic, and frankly, some of the products that some facilities that are manufacturing product today, they still need to manufacture that product. So now they're moving them to other lines that also may not be a very good fit. So there's a lot of challenges technically to kind of make the shoe fit, no matter what you're doing on the tech transfer. And then finally, high visibility. There's expectation that we get it right. There's no good, having it right first time ensures product confidence, public confidence, product safety, and making sure that the folks who are receiving that therapeutic or that vaccine have total confidence in the product that's being brought forward to market. So the spotlight's on us to do it right. So those are some of the things. And of course, it goes without saying, the one that I didn't put on the chart here, but clearly the actual health protection requirements of protecting the people who are doing these activities to ensure that everybody goes home safely at the end of the day is a key thing, and that there isn't passing of the COVID virus itself within the facilities we're working with. So those are a couple of thoughts that I have on what makes it even more challenging in the age of COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I imagine too that some of the communications and how you work through that in terms of limited face-to-face interaction and some things that you're not doing face-to-face that you would have changed things a little bit as well.
Definitely, that's a big challenge, and technology enablers are key. So things like persistent cameras in different locations, or 3D. I think there's also been a couple of presentations here in ISPE Boston on doing virtual inspections by regulatory bodies. So we'll cover that here today, but certainly it's a factor, and leveraging technology is certainly an enabler, and also sometimes a challenge too, because you have to come up to speed and get it installed and so forth.
So Charlie, can you tell us some of your best practices?
Yeah, so that's what we'll kind of move into now. That's kind of the body of the presentation here. Let me just start off with just a high level of the major steps of a tech transfer process. So here on the right-hand side, we'll just kind of highlight the planning milestones. So when a decision is made that we have to do tech transfer, you do some planning around it to make sure that you've got the foundational plan and team and so forth in place. The second step is knowledge management. So that's really focusing on collecting the knowledge at the sending site and packaging it up in a way that is well documented, and then transferring it to the receiving site. And of course, all the communication, that's the formal communication, of course, the informal human-to-human communications to transfer that knowledge to the site. So could involve site visits, could involve over the shoulder, could involve let's say virtual goggles. So the sending site may have put virtual goggles on the person who is performing a key activity in order to record it and provide real-time commentary on how they're doing the thing they're doing. And it could actually be live streamed to the receiving site, or alternatively recorded and viewed later. Those kind of activities traditionally are done by site visits. So the third step here is process readiness milestone. And so that's about, okay, so now we've got the knowledge transfer and so forth, but now what we need to do is to actually start ensuring that the equipment is ready, ensuring that the equipment is running, start doing, building up from unit operations up to engineering runs, up to preparing for qualification runs, and all the different things you need to do in the facility to ensure that it's ready to go, having the SOPs, people trained, all that kind of stuff. The fourth step is process qualification milestone. So qualifying the process itself and the analytical methods that support that process. And then finally, program handover, transitioning to steady state operations to ensure that the extra focus that's put in on tech transfer and getting it up running stays, and the level of rigor and the level of quality is durable throughout the life cycle of the product at the new facility. So, Eric, in the interest of time, we have just an hour to talk. What I really want to do is I really want to focus on the first stage here, the planning milestone. And that planning milestone is really pivotal to the success of a tech transfer, because that planning milestone, if done well, sets you up for success. If it's not done well, it pretty much gives you headwinds the entire time that you're doing tech transfer. So let me just kind of, first of all, break down, what the 7 major activities are during the planning phase, and then we'll kind of take them one by one and talk about them in sequence. So, the planning for tech transfer success is really focused on 7 things. So, partnering strategy. So, what is your who is it, and what do you want to partner about? The second one is the partner selection. And so kind of looking at the field and starting to understand what that field is, and then starting to narrow it down. And due diligence is when you have your short list. How are you going to figure out among the short list who you're going to work with? The program charter. So once you've chosen your partner, how are you going to actually set out the goals for what the objective is? Formatting your team, putting people in place on both the sending site, receiving site. Risk assessment, so understanding what the gap is in order to move the tech from the sending site to the receiving site, and then overall a project plan, so the detailed project plan to get it done. So those are the steps we're going to talk about in the next few minutes here. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about strategy. So partnering for success. One thing that I just want to bring out, this is another, partnering has always been a feature of the biopharma industry, but it's on steroids right now. And I'll next slide, I'll kind of address how on steroids it is. But one of the things that we're really finding out is, if a company does something well, that's where they should focus their effort on. And if it's something that's not a core source of value creation or an essential to the product quality, and these are the 2 things that I just put here as the main factors of what your decision about your partnering strategy should be. Those, so core source of value or creation or product quality items should be kept in-house, and everything else should be on the table for potential outsourcing to clients or to partners who might be able to do that better, faster, cheaper. And so that's really, what needs to be thought about. So a lot of times companies, in normal days might, kind of soldier on and say, hey, we can do all these things in-house. But if you really want to accelerate speed to market, you need to think about, hey, I'm a product development company, or I'm a manufacturing company, or I'm a quality consultant company, or I'm a partner that can do supply chain, and making sure that the right team is on the field to be able to everybody play their position and do it well and fast. And so really kind of elevating that concept around, putting partnership strategy at the center of your business strategy. That's really kind of what this slide is all about. And so, of course, successful partnerships have a common vision. They have complementary strengths. The culture and the values are a fit. Through the iterative working together, you build respect and trust. And there's clear defined responsibilities for both the business and quality side. And clearly there's a governance to, what are the process by which you guide the project and make decisions. And if things are getting a little bit challenging, how do we resolve those issues? So that's kind of what the strategy is. But let me just kind of talk about, this goes back to, how things are a little bit different now in the age of COVID. This is just a small sampling of some of the partnerships that have formed over the last, several months. Things that have probably never thought to be possible suddenly happen in the blink of an eye. And let me just take the top left one here as an example. So one of the ways that the strategies for addressing, the COVID-19 therapeutic challenge is using serum, basically from, I should say, plasma from people who have actually had the infection. So in other words, let's say I've had COVID, I would go donate my blood, they would purify it, extract the immunoglobulin, and use that as a treatment for other people who might need to have that immunity quickly built up to be able to fend off the disease. And now what could have happened is that each of the plasma manufacturers of the world could have gone out and said, hey, this is a great business opportunity for us. Let's go out and stand up our own program, get approval from the FDA by ourselves, and market it, and so forth. But that's not what happened. What actually happened is they formed this COVID-19 Plasma Alliance, and essentially you see all these including Takeda, formed an alliance, and they decided they were going to make one supply chain with one product, with one approval through the FDA, and make it fast and make it available to the public. Something that's really kind of unheard of. All the competitors coming together to be collaborators in the interest of the public good. So that's just one great example of partnership and speed. And of course, there's other ones here, and this will be available for you guys to take a look at. But having partnership at the center of your business strategy is key. So if you do that, then you need to start thinking about, okay, well, I'm going to partner in X, Y, and Z area. What do I need to do to identify who those potential partners are? So the approach that I would suggest is that you first of all take a look at what are the requirements. Before you start actually picking up the phone and calling people, you would actually figure out what it is that I need from a partner in this particular area. So the requirements, of course, cross-functional, not just if you're going to get supply chain, you got to think about quality, think about the business aspect, you got to think about supply chain resilience, all kinds of things that you need to bring to the table when you define the requirements for that partnership. Then I suggest that you develop a decision support tool. Now that could be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, or it could be something that is a little bit more sophisticated, such as what you see here on the right-hand side, a KT decision tool. And for those of you who are familiar with it, KT has three different kind of areas. I'm looking at the green area here, which is a deliberate, prospective decision, whereas yellow is more problem analysis. It's potential problem analysis, risk assessments, and then the red one down here is actual problem analysis. So that'd be a Kappa type activity. But we're up in the green department here. And that would allow you to make, hey, here's the 5 things that I need in there. These are the relative importance. Here's how I'm going to score all the different folks who are potential partners in those areas. And then you do a dedicated search. I would suggest that you go beyond your your buddy network, which is oftentimes the case. You see people who want to move fast, they call up people that they know, which is a good thing because you can reduce risk because you understand the partner that you are already working with. But perhaps there's a better partner, another partner out there that you haven't actually reached out to. So I would suggest either engaging in a deliberate search, which there are a lot of great tools to do that, or perhaps working with a consultant to do an actual search for you to get the right partners at least looked at and on the table and analyzed using your decision tool. And then from there, you shortlist down to the key ones you want to do further work with. So what happens if you don't have any good partners? That's a challenging thing. So nothing comes up. Well, it's two different approaches that I could suggest. Is one is like consider a phased approach. So maybe your partner doesn't fit you today because they don't have enough capacity, or they're just getting a certain product line started up. Well, a good way to do that is to maybe give a portion of the scope to them, what they can handle, and then work with them to develop them to be able to develop that capability or capacity at a later date, so that as you help them develop, you can transfer more and more of the work to them. Another one is a modular solution. So a lot of times, just getting a facility up and running to make GMP product is a challenge. So there's a number of modular solutions on the market of how to get a clean room up quickly. That's probably a speed to market piece that is clearly a premium at this time. And in fact, all the modular solution folks are really bringing that forward about their speed to market. So that's a great way to consider. So now we're down, Eric, we're down to the due diligence, where the kind of the rubber meets the road. You got your short list, and this is where I'm going to suggest that you mentioned earlier a lot of virtual tools and so forth, but in my view, nothing really beats going to the site and meeting the team, because this is going to be a partnership that your business and frankly the patients are depending on that we get it right. And so there's a point at which if you kind of narrowed it down, you got to manage your risk as best you can, but actually having that person-to-person relationship to understand how you're going to work together over a period of time. Every company has their supplier qualification process. So we had the decision tool, but then this is the time where you open up your quality assurance SOPs about how to do a supplier qualification, and you do that full supplier qualification. Don't cut the corners. Just because you have to do it fast doesn't mean that there should be any compromises in how that process is done, because that's getting it right the first time is the best way to move forward efficiently and quickly. Focus on a gap assessment. So if you're going to move a product from the current location to the new one, do a deep assessment on what the facilities and the equipment is at the new site, making sure that is all supported, including not just the equipment, but also the procedures and the people. Do they have enough trained staff to be able to do that new new activity, or is it going to have to be some kind of fast training effort, or are you going to have to bring people from the existing site to the new site to be operators for a transition period? And then this is one that I think is really critical, is reviewing batch records and CAPAs. So if somebody's, like for instance, you're looking at a CMO, if you take a look at the batch record and CAPA file, that tells a lot about what your future may look like. So if a company is manufacturing for other folks and they have a lot of CAPAs and batch record problems and slow release and so forth, you can expect that maybe that's how that facility and that team operates, and you don't want to be kind of stuck in that quagmire. So if you have another situation where there's very few deviations on the batch records and CAPAs are few and far between, and and well managed and so forth, that's a good indication of a healthy team to work with. So that's a thing to take into consideration. So once you've done all that work, then you go back to your support tool and you provide information into it, and then you ultimately select a partner. So Eric, this is kind of where we kind of take the big pivot. How are you tracking so far?
It's perfect. I think understanding kind of those fundamental elements of how we're finding who we're working with, and kind of getting those partners, to be successful. Coming from a company like Decatur, we're in there, finding those key partners to work with that can help you be successful. But maybe if we can talk a little bit about the program charter and some of these other elements, it would be great.
Okay, great. So you've selected your partner, and the next thing to do is to really kind of put some concrete plans around what you're going to do together. So it starts off with a chartering effort, and this is really at the 30,000 foot level. So it's agreed by all parties, and some of the key elements are, what are the business objectives? So there's a reason why we're going to have a partner. It's fun, it's obviously going to be fun and challenging, nice professional challenge and so forth. But ultimately, we want to get a important therapeutic delivered to the patient. That's really what it's all about. So how we're going to do it, what the time frame is, what are the intended markets, what's the regulatory strategy, the schedule, the budget, the resources, who you're going to have involved in it, the governance process, and what are the stage gate reviews to ensure that we're hitting the marks as we go. So these are the key things that are in a program charter. So once you have that in place, it's time to put a little bit more meat on the bone. And in order to do that, you need to have the experts kind of come around the table at this point. So you form the team, and again, tech transfer is a team sport. There's no one individual or a very small group of individuals who can do this all by themselves. Everybody has a position on the field to play. And that team has got to be cross-functional. You got to cover all the cross-functional areas to ensure that you have full knowledge transfer and implementation at the new site. The team has to be representative of both the sending unit and the receiving unit. And sometimes that's a challenge. So for instance, in tech transfer, where you're taking a developmental drug and putting it into a full-on manufacturing site, there may not be a head of manufacturing at the sending site. It might be the CMC head or something, the R&D folks, the product development folks, I should say. And so there may be aspects that need to be kind of augmented on one of the teams. So there should be on the sending side and the receiving side, there should be a team player on each of these positions of the cross-functional team. And then ultimately, making sure that those team members have the bandwidth to get it done. A lot of times I've seen this where you have a nice org chart, and a bunch of people are named on the org chart, but it turns out they don't have the time to actually do anything about the tech transfer. They're just kind of there by appointment on the piece of paper. It's got to be real. They have to be able to be bandwidth, and it has to be a priority on their assignments. And then finally, led by a tech transfer project manager, where somebody's got to be the orchestrator, the conductor of the orchestra, to make sure that it all comes together well. And across the bottom, I won't detail this, but this is what I would recommend as the minimum for the cross-functional teams. And each bullet there represents a team member for both the sending side and the receiving side. It doesn't have to necessarily always be a separate individual for each bullet, but they have to be represented by functionally in each side. So you get your charter, your team, and then you put your team to work. Let's go dig and really understand what it is that we need to do. So you do your cross-functional deep dive, or you can call it a risk assessment, or you can call it a gap assessment, whatever you like to do. But the idea is that the sending site is going to go and really collect up all the product process information, focusing on the CQAs, CPPs, and CMAs. And on the receiving site, they're really going to be looking, or the team, cross-functionally and collaboratively, will be looking at the programs, capabilities, facility, and personnel that are there to be able to receive that process. And then when you compare this, what's needed and what's available, then you find that gap assessment. So you understand, what for each functional area, the detailed risk assessment for each functional area. Then you pull that all together into a top-level report. So you have detailed by cross-functional area, but then you also have the executive, top level things that are the highest priority as far as the risk assessment and risk understanding what the risks and key success factors are going to be for that tech transfer. And those become the foundation for the next step, which is the tech transfer. Okay, actually I kind of rolled into here. Let me just, the next step here is the tech transfer project plan. But let me just take a step back here on this risk assessment and tell you how important it is. On the right-hand side, you see a simple diagram. It's two 300-gallon tanks, a couple of filters, a fill line, and a lyophilizer. Now, and it's small molecule. You'd think that a tech transfer, hey, I'm going to bring in a new product, I'm going to put it into this very simple system, and it's going to be able to manufacture a nice small molecule drug really quickly. And you think that that's going to be kind of a walk in the park. Well, guess what? If you find out, you kind of dig into it, you find out the mixing impeller has got to be different because the shear issues of the new drug. The product filters are different, hydrophobic and hydrophilic, different sizes. The CIP cycle and agents needed to clean the new drug are different. And so now you have to figure out those, do the coupon studies and cycle development and so forth to get that CIP cycle going. Similarly with the SIP, now you have different filters, particularly getting those SIPs on the filters done is a new cycle development challenge in itself. And of course, I didn't, with the mixing impeller, I didn't mention also the mixing studies you need to do. The filling needles, different product, obviously, different needles. And how does that fit into the old system? Maybe not so well. The vial sizes, well, it turns out you need a larger dose for the new product. The vial sizes need to be larger, and therefore the lyophilizer, which had 12 shelves in it, now has to have 2 shelves removed, and everything has to be recalibrated to have 10 shelves and even spacing for that. And all the carts and so forth have to be reconfigured to be able to support that. So when you take a look at what seems like a very simple transfer, tech transfer, it could be very challenging. And doing this risk assessment really brings to light all those challenges that you need to really think about to ensure that you've got yourself all the pieces of the puzzle lined up and ready to go to be able to be successful. So, Eric, I just kind of took a little side step there, but does that make sense on the importance of really doing that deep risk assessment so you understand fully right up front what you need to focus on for your project plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we look at this all the time in terms of risk assessments, whether it's, your supply chain and there's probably risks in these supply chains, a lot of these, even getting some of these raw materials and understanding if there's alternatives, that there's a lot of complexity in terms of making sure you understand the risk to being able to deliver.
Great. So bring all that risk assessment and the all the cross-functional areas of that risk assessment together, and you create a project plan. So this is the plan, where you have a detailed project schedule, work breakdown structure, resource planning, RACI, so who's responsible for what, risk register, KPIs, how are you going to measure your progress and your performance, issue resolution, and what process you're going to put in place for continuous improvement, because we want to learn and do better as the project goes along, and also set yourself up for future projects that are likely to follow once this project is over. So those are the 7 steps of the tech transfer project plan. And so it kind of brings us back to the starting point where I mentioned these are the high level steps of a tech transfer. And as I mentioned, in the interest of time, we're really going to focus on where we have focused on the planning milestone, getting ourselves set up for conditions for success so that all the other following pieces of it fall in place as executed in your project plan. So, Eric, I just, for me, it's all about these tech transfers. Really, it's all about producing quality medicines to meet patient needs. That's what really makes me excited about, the challenge and meeting that challenge, because I know at the end, patients are waiting for these important therapies and vaccines.
Yeah, absolutely. These are humbling times with what's going on and unique challenges.
So that kind of brings me to the end of the comments that I had. I'll just open up for questions if you have anything, or the folks have made some entries into Pigeonhole.
Yeah, there's definitely some questions in Pigeonhole, and I'll start one off. How can a team perform tech transfer if the products are not fully defined? This is kind of a classic question. Changes, especially at late stages, create new challenges. They require evaluation, even in capital purchases. This can sometimes cause significant impact to the schedule and budget. Can you talk through, as we're moving through, you're doing phase 2, phase 3. You're maybe even changing dosage numbers that can impact your equipment. How do you take this into effect?
Yeah, so I think that there's two things that I would suggest. The first of all is starting off with kind of the highest level of understanding what the objective is, and so making sure that the decision that there's always nice to haves, and there's always opportunities to improve whatever process it is. There's always opportunities to maybe make more of that. But if we start off with a real focus on what is the important, objective of serving the patients, then that can help us focus on what's core and what is optional. And so that helps then do the second piece of what I was going to suggest, is bounding the problem. So once you figure out what's really core to meeting the objectives of your tech transfer, then you can start understanding, okay, well, I don't know if I'm going to, you can fill in the blank, whatever that thing is, whether it's a technical issue, whether it's a supply chain question, whether it's personnel availability at the new site and training, level training, whatever that thing is. Then you can basically identify those through your risk assessment and then bound the problems. So you start off with your frictionless plane, or your best case situation. If everything goes well, this is the resources that I need. This is the time that I need. This is the scope of whatever it is. This is the quality requirements I need. This is the best case. And then you do branch and sequence analysis. Okay, well, if this problem came up, what are the potential outputs, or your knock-on effects on that branch? And if you have another, let's say in the product development phase, let's say you are not able to get satisfactory formulation. So what could the results of that be? Okay, well, you have to find another supplier. You have to have different engineering studies. You have to have a different kind of mixing approach. Maybe you have to have other components that go into the mix. So those are the, you kind of separate all the different, the fishbone. You can use it as a fishbone. The 5 different things that could go wrong. What are the impacts of those 5 things? And then you put an envelope around that whole thing, and you say, okay, worst case scenario, all 5 of those things go wrong. This is the maximum impact that I could have, and this is what I need to plan for as my worst case scenario. And of course, usually all 5 of those things don't go wrong. Maybe it's 1 or 2 of them. And then you could, you have other kind of, let's say, what do you call it, scenario planning. So you have best case scenario planning, you have worst case scenario planning, and then you choose judiciously based on, your knowledge or your team's knowledge, what are plausible scenarios that you may need to plan for that are intermediate between the best case and worst case. And that's kind of really how what I call bounding the problem, and helping the decision makers put their resources and time and effort in the right places to maximize success.
Absolutely. Let me go on to the next question. How early do people need to start this planning process?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Everybody, I'll have to say that more often than not, tech transfer is kind of like left to a little bit too late. If you take a look at our first slide, which is from ICH Q10, it basically said tech transfer is a part of product realization throughout the life cycle. And so what I'd offer is tech transfer has got to be something that's thought about and factored in right from the get-go. Right when you're in product development, you're thinking about developing a product, you need to think about how you're going to scale it, how it's going to be produced, what's the robustness of that process to be able to support different supply chains, different modes of manufacturing that same product, all that kind of stuff throughout the product life cycle. I've seen products where some very constraining decisions are made early in the life cycle, and it goes into the regulatory filings. And frankly, there are opportunities to improve a product through science and improvements in technology over the life cycle. But a lot of times the product owners decline to pursue those because it's just too costly to do the refiling and do all the studies to support it. So thinking about how you're going to plan for success throughout the product life cycle at the earliest stages is important. I'd also just put in a plug here for ICHQ 8, focus on the quality by design. Using that process is really a great way to set yourself up and take advantage of having a flexibility built in through that process.
Thanks. What is a typical duration of the PPQ process from initial planning through reports?
Okay, so this is highly dependent on the product, and so what I could just say is this: is that for products that are well understood, products that are let's say existing, and the the filings are in place and so forth, and you're simply just transferring to a new place, it could potentially be very quick because essentially the closer you can match the sending site or the receiving site to what's already existing at the sending site, and the processes and everything there, the supply chain, that is the path towards the fastest path to the exit door. Unfortunately, never really works out that way, and so that's where the risk assessment comes in and tells you what the big deltas are that have to be addressed and how much you can compress it. I'd also say that COVID has brought in a kind of a new way of thinking around quality and regulatory filings, more flexibility, more approach to problem solving rather than bureaucracy. And I'm not going to say that it ever was bureaucratic, but we all know that decisions that were made in 7 months can now be made in 1 2-hour Zoom, and that's kind of how things are floating. And so if we can keep that same kind of problem solving focused mentality, a lot of the things can be accelerated. But as far as PPQ itself, it really kind of depends. And I would say, for a well understood process and so forth, it could be as little as a month. By the time you get you do your setup, you do your unit operations, C and Q, and you have a good plan for rolling right into your PPQs. You could get it done fairly quickly. Obviously, have your CMC ready, section ready to for the filing, and that's probably the best case scenario.
With some of these emergency authorizations, are they going all the way through PPQ, or are those still in PPQ as they're getting released and using continuous process validation or some other data strategies to move them through a little bit quicker? And
yeah, you bring up a great point, and that's exactly what we're seeing is let's say innovation in both in innovation technology clearly, but innovation in regulatory strategies around getting a product to market. Whether it's early release, emergency clearances, and then ultimately final clearance for commercial operations. So yes, there's a lot of innovation there.
Absolutely. Do you see that some of that innovation will be a plus going forward in terms of being able to move future products through the market in an efficient but safe way?
So the great news about this, there's right now everybody's focused on solving the current problem, but the conversation or the topic you're bringing up here is that conversation that's happening in the background is saying, how can we cement, how can we put the magic in a bottle for us to be able to do this kind of fast innovation and introduction of novel products to the market in the same way that we've been able to do through the COVID process or crisis. And so 100%, that's the challenge. I'd say tune in in 2022, because a lot of it is going to be about securing the advances that we've made in regulatory strategy and quality and technology that have occurred very rapidly over the last year.
Absolutely. How much is too much when combining tech transfer with development and new innovative technologies? Particularly, how does a program manager avoid scope creep by well-intentioned stakeholders?
Right. This is what, first of all, why you need to have a project manager, and why that project manager has to have a very good, the project itself, but led by the project manager, a good charter and a good project plan, because that puts the fence posts around what you're going to do. And if there is a intention or an idea out there, like, there's a lot of scientists are good idea factories, with all greatest respect, because that's what they do. But a lot of times you got to kind of draw a line and say, hey, we're done. We're not doing product development anymore. We're doing product manufacturing. And you have to draw the line and say, okay, that future change or that change in the technology that you're going to use to manufacture it is going to be on version 2. And that's, we're just going to cut the line. And so you have to have that fortitude as a project manager to identify that, have a process to escalate it, and you have to have the governance in place to be able to make those decisions. Now, I'll say that sometimes there are changes that have to be made, right? As you start to scale up, you've found a problem that you didn't anticipate, and you do have to change in order to address that problem. Obviously, you've got to go there. But if it's a nice to have, it should be captured, it should be vetted, should be decided upon. And then if the decision is to not do it now, it goes into the quote unquote parking lot for version 2.
Awesome. Typically, people pick to fast, cheap, and good. In this methodology, is there a way that we're getting around that classic triangle?
Okay, this is one of my favorite questions, and actually, I have to say, through most of my career, I believe that the triangle was immutable, but I don't believe that anymore. I feel that and here's why. I'm a strong believer in the quality system, and if you follow the quality system, suddenly you find out that you are able to do things faster, better, and cheaper by doing things the right way the first time. Now, I'm not trying to say that product development isn't an iterative process, but there's an efficient way to do it using the quality by design process, and then there's the let's say less disciplined way to do it, which doesn't allow for elasticity in the triangle. So that's what I would say is that know your guidance. ICHQ8 is wonderful. And if we do that with some discipline, we can actually make that triangle bigger on all different legs.
Great to hear. How can a strong partnership be leveraged for efficiencies on both sides?
Well, that's a great point. So we talked about in the partnership section where there has to be a joint vision and there has to be a clear division of duties and responsibilities. And so what you find out is that, for instance, if you're dealing with a manufacturing, let's say I'm a product company, I'm engaging with a CMO. On one hand, having a CMO that has experience in manufacturing the class of products that I'm making helps me, because it creates a larger brain trust around an experience field around that product to be able to solve problems as it's being developed and expanded into commercial manufacturing. On the flip side, the CMO benefits a lot from having the experience of the new challenges that you bring to the table with your novel aspects of your product. And so that kind of feeds the bank of the CMO on both sides. So it's a virtuous cycle. And having partnerships, actually, this is just kind of goes to point number one around their partnering strategy. The thought that you can go it alone and do better than being part of a team of experts is just kind of a wrong thought right from the get-go. You need to focus on where you add the greatest value and the areas that are critical to quality of the product. Do those things well, focus your effort on that, and then leverage the knowledge in the network of your partners to do the other things because they do them better than you.
Absolutely. So we're running pretty low on time here. We got a few minutes left. Are there any lessons that we've learned from COVID that you feel will survive past this era?
Yeah, I think this kind of ties back to that question about, how can we do things better, faster, cheaper? And suddenly, like necessity is the mother of invention. And we find out that the things that we thought were hard and long could be done in a more compressed timeline. And so I think that's really what the biggest, challenge is that how are we going to actually change the whole, let's say, paradigm for how long it takes to develop, test, commercialize a drug so that we can actually accelerate that and at the same time keep the patient safe and maintain their trust that they have in the system that brings drugs to their medicine cabinet.
Yeah, thanks. I think we're running running on time. This seems like a lot of questions and a lot of energy here. I want to thank you, Charlie, for sharing your expertise with us today, and thank everyone who joined us in this webinar for your interest and support of the ISPE Boston Chapter's educational program. You'll receive a follow-up email with a short survey, and we would really appreciate your feedback. You'll also receive an email with a link to the recording for today's webinar. Thank you again to our dedicated sponsor, Massey Bioservices. On behalf of the ISP Boston chapter and our presenters, thank you again for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Hey, thanks a lot, Eric. Thanks. Everybody.